There will always be rocks in the road ahead of us. They will be stumbling blocks or stepping stones. It all depends on how you use them. Sometimes people don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed. I was in darkness, but I took 3 steps and found myself in paradise. The first step was a good thought, the second, a good word, and the third, a good deed. To live is to suffer, to survive is to find some meaning in the suffering. Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. And if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you. The snake which cannot cast its skin has to die. As well the minds which are prevented from changing their opinions, they cease to be mind. Young people love what is interesting and odd, no matter how true or false it is. More mature minds love what is interesting and odd about truth. Fully mature intellects, finally, love truth, even when it appears plain and simple, boring to the ordinary person, for they have noticed that truth tends to reveal its highest wisdom in the guise of simplicity. I am a forest, and a night of dark trees, but he who is not afraid of my darkness, will find banks full of roses under my cypresses. The great man is colder, harder, less hesitating, and without fear of opinion. He lacks the virtues that accompany respect and respectability, and altogether everything that is the virtue of the herd. If he cannot lead, he goes alone. He knows he is incommunicable, he finds it tasteless to be familiar. When not speaking to himself, he wears a mask. There is a solitude within him that is inaccessible to praise or blame. One can promise actions, but not feelings, for the latter are involuntary. He who promises to love forever or hate forever or be forever faithful to someone is promising something that is not in his power. Solitude makes us tougher towards ourselves and tenderer towards others. In both ways it improves our character. When marrying, ask yourself this question: do you believe that you will be able to converse well with this person into your old age? Everything else in marriage is transitory. Men who think deeply appear to be comedians in their dealings with others because they always have to feign superficiality in order to be understood. The most spiritual men, as the strongest, find their happiness where others would find their destruction, in the labyrinth, in hardness against themselves and others, in experiments. Their joy is self-conquest, asceticism becomes in them nature, need, and instinct. Difficult tasks are a privilege to them, to play with burdens and crush others, a recreation. Knowledge a form of asceticism. They are the most venerable kind of man, that does not preclude their being the most cheerful and the kindliest. The craving for equality can express itself either as a desire to pull everyone down to our own level, by belittling them, excluding them, tripping them up, or as a desire to raise ourselves up along with everyone else, by acknowledging them, helping them, and rejoicing in their success. To predict the behavior of ordinary people in advance, you only have to assume that they will always try to escape a disagreeable situation with the smallest possible expenditure of intelligence. My solitude doesn't depend on the presence or absence of people. On the contrary, I hate who steals my solitude without, in exchange, offering me true company. What is the difference between someone who is convinced and one who is deceived? None, if he is well deceived. And if your friend does evil to you, say to him, I forgive you for what you did to me, but how can I forgive you for what you did to yourself? People who live in an age of corruption are witty and slanderous. They know that there are other kinds of murder than by dagger or assault. They also know that whatever is well said is believed. But it is the same with man as with the tree. The more he seeketh to rise into the height and light, the more vigorously do his roots struggle earthward, downward, into the dark and deep, into the evil. Liberal institutions straightway cease being liberal the moment they are soundly established. Once this is attained, no more grievous and more thorough enemies of freedom exist than liberal institutions. All things are subject to interpretation. Whichever interpretation prevails at a given time is a function of power and not truth. The surest way to corrupt a youth is to instruct him to hold in higher esteem those who think alike than those who think differently. There are horrible people who, instead of solving a problem, tangle it up and make it harder to solve for anyone who wants to deal with it. Whoever does not know how to hit the nail on the head should be asked not to hit it at all. What is the task of higher education? To make a man into a machine. What are the means employed? He is taught how to suffer being bored. But the worst enemy you can meet will always be yourself. You lie in wait for yourself in caverns and forests, lonely one, you are going the way to yourself. And your way goes past yourself, and past your 7 devils. You will be a heretic to yourself, and witch and soothsayer and fool and doubter and unholy one and villain. You must be ready to burn yourself in your own flame. How could you become new, if you had not first become ashes? One must learn to love oneself with a wholesome and healthy love, so that one can bear to be with oneself and need not roam. To learn to see, to accustom the eye to calmness, to patience, and to allow things to come up to it, to defer judgment, and to acquire the habit of approaching and grasping an individual case from all sides. This is the first preparatory schooling of intellectuality. One must not respond immediately to a stimulus. One must acquire a command of the obstructing and isolating instincts.